Matt Krause, thank you so much for joining us. You have been a state representative out of Fort Worth since 2013, and now you're decided to run for Texas Attorney General. Why is that, and what will your priorities be if you are elected?
Yeah, Jack, and thanks for having me. It's always good to be with you. Unfortunately, the incumbent who's in the office right now has just made too many decisions that have compromised, I believe, himself personally and the office as a whole. And so we kind of looked at the field of candidates and saw that there really wasn't that proven conservative in the race that was challenging the incumbent at the time. And so we thought long and hard about it, prayed about it, and we got into the race. And so we think that the people of Texas want a faithful conservative fighter who's not caught up in being distracted by so many other things, again, whether it's personally or professionally. And so Texas needs that faithful conservative fighter for attorney general against an overreaching federal government, against even things at the local government within the state. We've got to have somebody who can dedicate their full time and attention to the job. That's why I'm running, and that's what I'm looking to do.
With regards to the incumbent, Ken Paxton, what is your biggest concern if he were to become the nominee?
That we would have a Democrat AG after next November. That report that his top 8 lieutenants submitted to the FBI alleging abuse of office and also potential bribery was very concerning. And so the more I've looked into that report, the more I've looked into those allegations, the more serious and concerned I got. And so I think that's the biggest thing, because if he does become our nominee, then does the FBI come out with the indictments at a very politically inopportune time for Texans and for Republicans on the ticket? Or is he so badly weakened because of those indictments that we could see our attorney general lose in November, which would give us a Democrat AG for defending redistricting, election integrity, and so many of the other big bills and big items that we passed this last session?
So how will you make the case to voters that you are the best Republican, at least for the primary, because you got to go through that first? How will you make the case?
Absolutely. And again, it comes back to that being that faithful conservative fighter. I've got 10 years pretty much of experience fighting on every front that are important to Republican primary voters, whether it's the Second Amendment, whether it's pro-life issues, religious liberty issues, border security, you name it. I and my office have been leading on those issues for the last almost 10 years. And so I think that's what people are looking for, somebody they can trust, somebody they know is going to be that faithful conservative fighter. And I think you see that. Sure, there's a lot of things the incumbent can point to fighting against the Biden administration, but there's just too much baggage, too much compromised decision-making that really hurts our chances to win in November. That's why we cannot have him as our nominee.
And as we speak, the Republican field may be growing, because this week, as you know, East Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert said that he may enter the race. And so if that's the case, you said you thought you were the conservative. If he gets in, what does that do to your campaign?
Well, first of all, I think you saw in his announcement, his website and everything else, he is really making the same points that I'm making right now. He keeps talking about how much trouble the Republicans can be in next November if Paxton is the nominee. He continues to talk about the personal and professional poor decisions that have been had. And so I think it's always helpful when more people, especially, you can't question Congressman Gohmert's conservative bona fides. You can't question his relationship with Trump and others. And so for somebody who is that tight with Trump to come out and feel he needs to even explore an AG run against a Trump endorsed candidate, I think speaks volumes.
And so when I've spoken with conservatives in the grassroots about this particular race, they say they want a fighter. What does that mean to you? What is a fighter, and are they right?
Yeah, they're absolutely right. And again, I go back to what our campaign has been talking about since the day we launched, about being a faithful conservative fighter. And so again, I think you've seen it in my entire legislative career, whether it's those issues important to the Republican primary voters, pro-life issues, religious liberty issues, Second Amendment issues, I've been fighting all along the way. And so we have to have an attorney general who's willing to fight against an overreaching federal government. We have to have an attorney general who's willing to fight against even local governments that may be stepping out of line. And there could even potentially be a time or two where the state government needs to be reined in as well. So yes, the grassroots are looking for a fighter. We are that faithful conservative fighter. And as we've been out across the state the last couple of months, our message has really resonated.
So what are your top priorities and the issues? If you are elected, what do you have to do? What is most important to you if you were elected as Texas Attorney General?
Yeah, again, you wake up every day seeing where you can defend Texans' rights and liberties. Now, that could be against the Obama administration and vaccine mandates, unconstitutional vaccine mandates that they're pushing down. It could be school systems where we have inappropriate books, or we have things that are on shelves that shouldn't be there. And so again, our number one goal when we get sworn in is to defend and protect the Texas Constitution, the United States Constitution. That's our number one goal, and that's the lens through which everything will be viewed in our office.
Well, late last month, you made headlines when you sent a letter as being a state representative to the school districts across the state and the Texas Education Agency, asking them if they had any of the books on your list, which I think was 850 books. Why did you do that? And I think you asked for responses to be due by November 12th. Have you gotten any back?
Well, and that's been one of the interesting things about this. These inquiries are usually private and confidential. So we never expected this to even be out in the public domain. We thought we'd send the letters out, we'd get the responses back and decide whether anything needs to be done from there. And as the General Investigating Committee, it's set up a little different than most of the other committees, and we cannot comment on pending or potential investigations. And so I can't go into the specifics, I can't go into the details, but what I can say now that that letter has been put out in the public domain is we're seeing incidences all across the state where there's inappropriate material for one reason or another. The stock of where what books are where, I think, is very helpful. We've had school districts and school officials thank us for giving them the opportunity to figure out what they have in their school district. And again, that list wasn't exhaustive, it wasn't exclusive, and just because a book's on that list doesn't mean it's problematic. It doesn't mean that if you have one of those books that there's automatically a problem. What it means is that the content in that book corresponds to two of the bills that we referenced in that letter. And so we need to go and see, okay, is that message too broad? Is that legislation too broad? Do we need to narrow it, tailor it, so we don't bring in it the content of some of these books that are very appropriate? So that's all part of an inquiry just to get that information back.
What do you say to those who say this was all just a publicity stunt?
Yeah, I kind of laugh because, again, this was never supposed to be made public. When we sent that letter out, I thought I would never be able to talk about it. I would never be able to tell people that we sent out that letter. I would never discuss it. And so kind of an odd issue to try to elevate your profile for a race when it's something that you feel is private. And then when it comes out, you can't even talk about it. I mean, we had so many can't comment, no comment, can't comment. And if I was really doing it to elevate my position in the race, I'd have been on every station, everything I could do. So I get why people may think that, but again, since it was supposed to be private and since I can't comment on it, it seems like a weird issue for us to try to elevate our profile.
But there was a reason that you initiated it. And I'm wondering how big of a concern this is, broader context outside the investigation for you.
Yeah, well, I think you've seen Governor Abbott in just the last few days really follow up on that letter, ask for a criminal investigation into some of these books that are on the shelves. He's asked TEA and others to promulgate standards that ensure we don't have some of these very, very inappropriate books in our schools. And so I was pleased that the governor's done that and kind of taken over from where our letter kind of generated the conversation. And so we'll see what comes from there.
I wanted to ask you about the Texas Heartbeat Act. As you know, the Solicitor General last week went before the U.S. Supreme Court, and I'm wondering How did you think the state of Texas did, Ken Paxton's team did before the court?
Well, you saw a lot of skeptical questions from the Supreme Court justices. Now, having practiced constitutional law in the past and seen many of those arguments before the Supreme Court, you can't always gauge how they're going to rule just because they ask hard questions or they seem one-sided. I do think there is some discussion whether the enforcement mechanism is a proper one. But I think it's always good when the state of Texas can go to Washington, D.C. and stand for the proposition that every life matters and that if a heartbeat is detected, it must be protected. And so I hope we win. I hope we keep winning. And I hope that law continues to go into effect.
So let me ask you, how concerned are you by some of the justices who asked, and some other groups, I think a gun rights group had even made this point in one of its filings to the court, that if you allow this law to be in effect and where you have civil lawsuits being the enforcement mechanism, then what's stopping states from going after using the same kind of enforcement mechanism for another constitutional right, such as the Second Amendment?
Yeah, well, I would say to delineate those two, the Second Amendment is found right there in the Bill of Rights, one of the first rights that we had about being able to keep and bear arms. The right to abortion didn't come along until 1973. So it's not nearly as entrenched in the American fiber as the right to keep and bear arms. So, but we'll see what the Supreme Court does with it. If they do strike it down, we'll figure out another way to save innocent baby lives. But I hope that they won't. I hope they'll let it go into effect and we can continue to save babies.
And let me ask you, as you know, the Biden administration has sued the state of Texas over the election integrity law, and the state of Texas has sued the Biden administration over its rule requiring the COVID-19 vaccine or regular COVID testing in large companies. So where are you on both of these issues?
Yeah, I stand with and again, I remember, I think it was Greg Abbott several years ago when he was AG. He said his job was to wake up, get ready, sue Obama, and go to bed. And I think that's going to be a lot of the job description for myself. When we get elected Attorney General, as part of being that faithful conservative fighter, we're going to constantly be on the lookout of ways that the federal government is encroaching upon our rights. And so whether that's them suing us or us having to sue them, we will be vigilant on that. We passed a very strong and a very good election integrity law. I'm very proud of it, and I think it'll help. And then the vaccine mandate is unconstitutional. Everybody knows it. I think even President Biden knows it. It's just a stunt to buy him more time, helps him to his left flank, but he knows it's going to get struck down.
And where are you on Governor Abbott's executive order to ban COVID-19 vaccine mandates? And did you support legislation that would, make it so?
I think the best thing we can do for the vaccine mandate issue is to be called back in for a fourth special session and address it there. Legislation is always much more strong, much more susceptible or unsusceptible to court challenges as executive order. So I'm hoping Governor Abbott will call us back. It doesn't have to be a long special session, but call us back and we can pass a law like Representative Brian Harrison, one of the newest members or the newest member in the Texas House. I guess one of the newest members now. We've had a special election since then. He had a great bill in the third special session. I was a co-author of it. I hope we bring that back in a fourth special session. I look forward to supporting it and passing it.
Well, what do you say to business owners who say that should be their right as a business owner to decide whether they have a vaccine mandate or not?
Yeah, and that's a great question because it seems a little inconsistent from folks. The free market and government shouldn't get involved in private businesses. But I think there's always an exception to the rule. And sometimes that exception proves the rule. And a rule that would force Texas citizens to put something they may be very uncomfortable with. I worked again in time and again on accommodations for employees, religious accommodations. And employers have always kind of worked with those folks if there's a way to do that. We're not seeing any of that work here. I think when it's a very new vaccine, we still don't know all the long-term effects. We don't know all of the effects of it. that's not something we should be mandating and forcing on everybody else. And so, again, I understand the question. I understand the concern behind that, but I think the exception proves the rule here. And I don't think we should have the government, even private businesses, mandating what people have to put into their bodies.
And my last question to you is, what kind of campaign are you going to be running?
A grassroots driven campaign that highlights being a faithful conservative fighter that, again, so far has resonated with voters all across the state, East Texas, South Texas, right here in North Texas, and everywhere else. And so we're going to run a grassroots campaign telling the folks of Texas exactly what we're going to do. Should we become the next attorney general? I think that's the best approach. I think that's the right approach. And I think that's the most effective approach. And so be on the lookout for us, talking about being a faithful conservative fighter all over this state. Look forward to being in everyone's area who's watching this at some point. Come out and see us, ask us questions, and look forward to hopefully earning every one of your votes, and look forward to the conversations we'll have in between.
Matt Krause, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack.